time for Overtime.
Stop what you're doing and listen.
In the world of sports, it's all about the playmakers in today's headlines, from locals to the pros, with interviews from local standouts and sports all-stars across the country that will have you talking.
Here we go.
And the puck is blocked. It's free.
Hear from coaches to players, sports analysts, and broadcasters who are a part of the action every day. Overtime, now on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you. A little bit of a late start to hour number 2, but glad that you're along for the ride today. Overtime, ESPN 102.3, AM 1000, KSOO. Headlines and highlights in store right now. The latest from the NFL in a bit, including checking in on the latest NBA Western Conference standings and the latest odds to win the NBA Finals. I got to tell you, there's been some movement in a good way for the Minnesota Timberwolves. They've moved inside the top 10 in title odds. We'll let you know where they've ended up and who they've moved past in the latest NBA odds, courtesy of DraftKings Sportsbook in hour number 2. That's coming up in about 15, 20 minutes or so. In about 30 minutes, we'll be talking with Bill Bender of the Sporting News. You can talk to anyone these days about college sports, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, something in between, and everybody's got an opinion on where it is, the NIL, the playoff, everything out there. We'll get the latest and greatest from Bill Bender of the Sporting News, talking about potential expansion to NCAA's March Madness from 68 teams out to 80, out to 100, maybe 150. Maybe we'll just invite everyone to March Madness. I know that would be cool, but I think it's perfect as it is right now. We'll also talk about the college football playoff, some of the obstacles, some of the hurdles in the way of them expanding from 12 to 14 before we've even played a single iteration of the 12-team college football playoff. We'll get the latest on the college sports scene with Bill Bender of the Sporting News coming up in about 25 minutes, maybe a half hour at most. And we'll finish up today's show with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Certainly a lot to get to from collegiate basketball, but we always start the scorecard this time of the year with a look and listen back on the NHL. Winnipeg lost to Washington yesterday 3-0. Colorado in overtime finds a way to win against Pittsburgh. Avalanche moved their record to 46-20-5 on the year. Similar story for Tampa Bay as they needed overtime to get by Anaheim, but another big win for the Lightning.
McTavish on the right wing, cross the line, right circle. A drop pass is going to be intercepted. Cirelli has a 2-1-0 the other way. Cirelli and Hagel. Cirelli for Hagel. Back for Cirelli. Score! Cirelli! Just like the goal he scored in Vegas. Anthony Cirelli wins it in overtime.
Very excitable broadcast there. Tampa Bay 3, Anaheim 2. Lightning's new record 39-25-7. Audio there courtesy of WFLA. Other final, Montreal wins in Seattle 5-1. Tonight in the NHL, just 2 games. Golden Knights at Blues, 7 o'clock. Kings at Canucks at 8 o'clock. You can stream that second game on ESPN+. First one is on the NHL Network. NBA Finals from yesterday. Miami absolutely boat races Cleveland 121-84. The Heat are 39-32. And Milwaukee helps out the Minnesota Timberwolves with a dominant win 118-93 over the Thunder.
Under 5 minutes to go for Lindy Waters the third, and alley-oop thrown up, and it's Middleton to Giannis. Rises high and throws it down with a right hand. Antetokounmpo like he was on a pogo stick.
Giannis 30 points and 19 rebounds. Audio courtesy of WTMJ. Other finals, Minnesota Timberwolves continue to win. They're keeping pace in the Western Conference with a 114-110 victory over Golden State.
6 to shoot. Jaden left-handed dribble. Mid-post hesitates, rises, tough two. Off the front rim and it trickles in. Big-time shot by Jaden McDaniels. He's 3 of 8 shooting tonight.
Final score 114-110. Golden State with the loss falls to 36-34. Minnesota with the win, keeping pace in the Western Conference 49-22. Other final, very high-scoring contest. Lakers down Indiana 150-145. Anthony Davis, 36 points and 16 rebounds in the win. Tonight in the NBA, Celtics at Hawks 6:30. Other games coming up, Wizards at Bulls at 7. Grizzlies at Nuggets 8 o'clock. Sixers at Kings 9 o'clock on NBA TV. And lastly, Pacers visit the Clippers 9:30 for the nightcap tonight in the NBA. Men's basketball finals yesterday, not close between Utah State and Purdue. Boilers dominate 106-67 in that contest. UConn, similar story over Northwestern, 75-58. Took Houston overtime, but they get by no problem against Texas A&M, 100-95. Emmanuel Sharp with 30 points. Kelvin Sampson says continuity is key with his team.
Most of our guys came in as freshmen and stayed. And probably the statistic that still blows me away in this day and age is in our top 10 players over the last 10 years, we've only had 2 kids transfer that was in our top 10. That tells you a lot about the kind of culture that we've built and the kind of kids that we've recruited.
Houston 100, Texas A&M 95 in overtime. One of the better games yesterday. Another good game yesterday. Colorado and Marquette face off. Head coach Shaka Smart after the win saying that was a really good team.
I'm just so grateful for our guys, the way they hung in there. Colorado made a heck of a run. That's about as good of a 10 seed as I've ever seen in my life. We started watching tape a couple days ago, and we said, who made these guys a 10 seed?
81-77 the final. Golden Eagles dancing into the Sweet 16, as are the Clemson Tigers. 72-64 seed upset over third-seeded Baylor. 6th-seed Clemson onto the Sweet 16. 4th-seeded Duke dominating James Madison yesterday, 93-55, behind 30 points from Jared McCain. Alabama hangs on for a win over Grand Canyon, 72-61. And San Diego State, dominant win over Cinderella Yale, 85-57. Brian Dutcher saying his team is gearing up to see UConn.
I reference it when I try to boost their confidence and say they've got experience on the biggest stage, that this is nothing new to them, that just go out there, enjoy it, play fearless. This is the time of year to be fearless, and don't worry about making a mistake. Play your best, and we have experience in the tournament, and I think some of that experience showed over the last 2 games.
Sweet 16 begins on Thursday for the men. Couple highlights here. Clemson and Arizona, 6 o'clock on CBS. And Illinois and Iowa State, the nightcap on Thursday night, 9 o'clock on TBS. That's Illinois and Iowa State, 3-2 seed matchup, respectively. Women's basketball over the weekend for our local team. South Dakota State, the 12 seed, lost to 5th-seeded Utah 68-54 on Saturday night. UC Riverside collided with USD in the WNIT's first round on Friday night. Yotes win that one 72-57. More on their future here in just a second. But yesterday in women's basketball, South Carolina more than doubles up rival North Carolina, 88-41. Duke with the biggest upset of the women's tournament so far, 75-63 win over Ohio State. Iowa State gave Stanford all they could handle, but the Cardinal come out on top in overtime, 87-81. Nebraska's season comes to a close with a 10-point loss to Oregon State, 61-51. And Colorado seed upset over Kansas State, 63-50. Today in women's basketball, you got 4 games of local interest going on. Beginning at 1 o'clock, Notre Dame faces off with Ole Miss. 7 o'clock tonight on ESPN, Caitlin Clark and the Hawkeyes take on West Virginia. That's a 1-8 seed matchup. 2-7 seed matchup between 2nd-seeded UCLA, 7th-seeded Creighton, 7:30 on ESPN2, and top-seeded USC. Southern Cal will face off with 8th-seeded Kansas, 9 o'clock on ESPN. Next up for USD, they will play host tomorrow at 7 o'clock in Vermillion. Sanford Coyote Sports Center, USD plays host to Northern Arizona in the second round of the WNIT. NFL news and sound to get to. Ryan Poles, the GM of the Chicago Bears, saying there's been many difficult moves for the team to make this offseason.
Justin, probably one of the harder things I had to do. I know, I always kind of touch on the empathy part. Like having that conversation with my own son was hard. His jersey's up in his room, so it kind of puts that into perspective of how difficult those moves are.
Movers and shakers for the Chicago Bears. We talked with Robert Schmitz in hour number 1. It seems like a foregone conclusion that Caleb Williams will be the top pick in the NFL draft that's upcoming in Detroit, April 25th through the 27th. Other teams with decisions to make at quarterback include the Pittsburgh Steelers. They've got Justin Fields. They've got Russell Wilson. They let go of Kenny Pickett via trade. Mike Tomlin saying it's Russ who's the QB1 for now.
We're not resistant to competition, but as I've mentioned several times of late, I just think it's appropriate to establish positioning as we get into this thing. And the term that I've used is Russell has pole position. And why do I use that term? Because during this time where we're not formally working, man, I just think it's beneficial. His experience in the National Football League, his process that's been honed and perfected, talking about over a 12-month calendar, is not only good for him, it's good for teams. When it's time to compete, we get in training camp-like settings and going to preseason stadiums and so forth. Obviously, Justin will be given an opportunity to show his capability.
Interesting stuff there. Again, Russell Wilson, the likely Week 1 starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I say this matter-of-factly, I really do like what the Pittsburgh Steelers have going on because they essentially have two guys on one-year deals. They'll see what they can get out of both of them, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, whoever ends up walking out of that situation, as in to a different team via free agency next offseason, because I don't think it would be likely that both return beyond the 2024 season. Steelers are likely to pick up a comp pick because one of those guys might still be worth a kick of the tires. Justin Fields probably will see the field at some point. Russell Wilson with the quote-unquote pole position. According to head coach Mike Tomlin, I think the quarterback position group there in Pittsburgh is improved. That's a good, not great team. Should be a playoff team. We'll wait and see. Some movers and shakers on the roster, but overall, the Steelers have retained that core that made another playoff appearance just this past season. Weekend recap concludes with NASCAR. William Byron won yesterday at the Circuit of the Americas down in Austin, Texas, and it was Peter Malnati winning at the Valspar Championship from Palm Harbor, Florida over the weekend, 12 under par, getting by Cameron Young, who was second at 10 under. On to your Reliabank headlines of the day now. South Dakota State women's basketball team lost to Utah in the opening round of the NCAA tournament Saturday night at the McCarthy Athletic Center in Spokane, Washington. Jackrabbits wrap up and conclude the season at 27-6 overall. Tori Nelson, SDSU's lone senior, led the Jacks with 14 points on 4 of 7 shooting from the floor in her final game. She also had 4 rebounds, 1 block, and a steal. Brooklyn Meyer added 13. Paige Meyer had 12 as the Jacks fall in the contest. Again, the final score in that game between Utah and South Dakota State was 68-54. Advantage of the U. South Dakota State now is 5-12 all time in 12 tournament appearances. And Paige Meyer, 42nd member of South Dakota State's 1,000-point club. And Tori Nelson's career comes to a close again. 14 points to lead the Jackrabbits in a heroic effort against Utah on Saturday night. USD Coyote women's basketball still in action after picking up a win over UC Riverside. That final score 72-57. Strong fourth quarter for the Yotes was the difference. South Dakota now advances to the second round of the WNIT with a record of 22-12 on the season. The Yotes are scheduled to host Northern Arizona, 7 o'clock tomorrow night inside the Sanford Coyote Sports Center down in Vermilion. For tickets and more matchup information, GoYotes.com. Ticketing specifically, GoYotes.com/tickets. Augustana's Isaac Fink was voted to the All-District team for the Central Region by the NABC. Announced today, the All-Region honor is the second of the season for the Viking senior. In his senior campaign, Fink saved his best for last. Really dynamic down the stretch, 20.6 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, also shot 47% from the floor and made nearly 40% of his threes. Concluded his collegiate career with more than 1,800 points and ranks 6th all-time in program history with 1,828 points. The first team All-NSIC honoree is also adding a second team in there as well. 2-time first team and a one-time second team All-NSIC performer. Congratulations to Isaac Fink. 8 South Dakota football alumni are displaying their skills for NFL scouts today, as well as CFL representatives during the Pro Day inside the Dakota Dome. The group includes Miles Harden, Brock Mogensen, Stephen Hillis, Brendan Webb, and 4 others as well. 8 players across the board for USD, most likely. Not to slight any players here, but most likely player to be drafted, to be highest drafted in this group. Miles Harden, the team captain for All-America teams this year. AFCA, Stats Perform, Phil Steele, and Associated Press. Our first team All-Conference cornerback. Likely to be drafted or at least a high priority undrafted free agent. Other guys that'll get a shot, Brock Mogensen, Stephen Hillis, Brendan Webb, and there's 8 total in that group. You can check out more and I'm sure see some highlights on Twitter as well. GoYotes.com. Shohei Ohtani will speak to the media today, and it is about time because we need some sort of detail, some sort of clarity to come out of this very strange situation that has emerged concerning the brightest star in Major League Baseball, his friend and longtime interpreter. And again, here is the latest. It's been a back and forth, a lot of odd commentary and a retraction of what initially happened, like it was a tandem payoff of gambling debt, and then it was a massive theft, and I use that as the quote. The Dodgers were opening their season in South Korea last week when Ohtani and the situation officially came out. But yesterday, before an exhibition contest that marked the Dodgers' first stateside game since the matter began, 10 cameras were around Dodgers manager Dave Roberts, and Roberts said it is quote-unquote good that Ohtani will address the matter with the media this afternoon. It's the right thing to do, Roberts added. I'm happy he's going to speak to what he knows and give his thoughts on the whole situation. I think it'll give us all a little bit of more clarity. To be clear, and the article at ESPN.com notes this as well, Shohei Ohtani has not been accused of gambling, and none of the bets are believed to have been made on the sport of baseball, a circumstance that could lead to a permanent ban from the sport. But California is one of a dozen states in which sports betting remains illegal. The bookmaker in question, Orange County resident Matthew Boyer, had his home raided in October amid an investigation by the same U.S. Attorney's Office handling a sprawling federal money laundering and illegal gambling case in Las Vegas that drew in former minor league baseball player Wayne Nix. Major League Baseball announced on Friday afternoon that its Department of Investigations also is formally looking into the matter. So this could get a lot more ugly before it gets pretty again. We'll wait and see. Hopefully, for the future of Major League Baseball, Shohei Ohtani, his interpreter, hopefully we can get some clarity here and finally get the story straight today with Ohtani set to address the media this afternoon. I am certain we'll get some more to talk about tomorrow on the show, but Shohei reportedly will speak to the media today in regards to what he knows and what is going on with that situation with now his former interpreter, Mizuhara, the last name for that individual. When we come back, it's time for the latest from the National Football League. Certainly a lot to get to there. We'll check in on the NBA standings and the latest odds where the Minnesota Timberwolves, despite being up and down over the last couple weeks, have seen an increase and a jump in their odds. They're finally clear of a tie with the LA Lakers, and the Minnesota Timberwolves are shooting up the NBA Finals odds list. We'll tell you where they are, who the favorites are, and some other movers and shakers here very shortly. It's the Monday edition of Overtime. Back with more after this.
Overtime is in the middle of your workday. Unwrap your sandwich and get caught up with Bert Rameen on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you this Monday edition of Overtime. We got big news out of the NFL breaking as of this morning. About an hour ago, NFL owners have approved a rule proposal to ban the swivel hip drop tackle, according to the league announced as of this morning. The violation will result in a 15-yard penalty if flagged in games, but Troy Vincent, the NFL's executive vice president of football operations, strongly implied last week that is likely to be enforced similarly to the use of helmet rule, which has all but disappeared. That's the offensive player lowering the crown of the helmet to initiate contact. It typically leads to a warning letter and fines in the week after a game rather than flags during play. That's good news. The proposal was written to address only a subset of the rugby tackling style that has spread around the NFL in recent years. Competition Committee Chairman Rich McKay said last week. Here we go. The tackling technique often results in lower body injuries. The rule requires officials to note two actions. If a defender, quote, grabs the runner with both hands or wraps the runner with both arms and also, quote, unweights himself by swiveling and dropping his hips and or lower body, landing on and trapping the runner's legs or at or below the knee. On Monday, McKay clarified that Monday's rule change doesn't eliminate the hip drop tackle, only the swivel technique that doesn't get used very often. I love that the NFL has made such a marketed improvement in safety. concussions are down, and when they do occur, the NFL has gotten so much better about getting these players checked out, getting them evaluated by independent neurologists, and then the concussion protocol has been really great. It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but in the sport of people having head injuries and in the past re-entering a football game and opening themselves up to even worse injury and maybe even having a concussion or getting your bell rung, as it used to be called, you go back into the game and it could be really much, much worse. And also, if you leave the game and come back the next week and you're not physically, mentally ready, that's something they're also doing a good job of avoiding. But my whole issue and question here about this hip drop tackle is the subjective nature of it all. Meaning, when they throw the flag and they call this for the first time, second, third, fourth, fifth time, everyone's going to be up in arms because it's really hard to define exactly what this is. You know, depending upon a player's speed, a player's movement, they can drag the player that's trying to tackle them. And they've always said, okay, we can't target up top anymore. Go for the ankles, go for the knees, wrap up, and do a solid job wrapping up the ball carrier. If you're coming from the side angle, if you're chasing somebody at, let's say, a 45-degree angle, it's going to be really hard not to wrap up and lose yourself in a weightless moment and fall down around the ankle or the knee. So it's going to be kind of difficult to rule this and difficult to defend it when it comes around. Several NFL players already are chiming in. DJ Reader saying these rules are getting crazy. Out here, two-end tag is a better fit for the game. Darius Slay, it's about to be a lot of missed tackles. And Javon Holland, breaking news, tackling banned in the NFL. There's all sorts of critiques coming out. My issue is the subjective nature, because what it's going to end up being is if this starts to be a common flag, like we saw with pass interference or illegal contact or roughing the passer, fans are going to immediately say, this should be reviewable. And then next year at this time, we're going to be talking about how out of control the hip drop tackle flags are. And man, we should initiate a review for that, make the games longer, make the games worse. I don't love it. I certainly understand the safety aspect, but a lot of this stuff, and you could tell me honestly, had you heard of a hip drop tackle before this time last year? I don't think so. And I'm not saying it's not a real safety concern. My heart goes out to the guys that have gotten hurt by being landed on, or if there's some sort of technique that Logan Wilson was flagged for, or other guys have been flagged for, where they drop down on an ankle. I don't view and think that players would do that intentionally. Maybe I'm naive, but I don't think anyone really had heard of hip drop tackle. It just feels kind of like a in vogue deal with the NFL. I'm all for legislating difficult actions and injuring future injuries out of the game as much as possible without getting rid of the game itself. But when you tell defenders they can't hit up high, they can't hit up down low, they can't hit a defenseless receiver, they can't contact the quarterback's head, what is a defender supposed to do these days? It is getting really difficult to get an answer to that question. Lastly, here on the NFL, we're running out of time. Got to get to Bill Bender here in just a moment. Two other proposals were approved today. Teams will receive, love this, teams will receive a third challenge following one successful challenge. Previously, teams that had to be successful on both of their first two challenges. That rule never made sense, and frankly, I don't know why teams have a limit on challenges other than the speed of the game. But again, you get a third one if you get one of your first two correct. A major foul by the offense will be enforced before a change of possession in situations where there are fouls by both teams. Those are a couple of the approvals today, and a new rule to be on the lookout for in the National Football League, the hip drop swivel tackle rule. Just rolls off the tongue. We'll take the break. Bill Bender with the Sporting News next on Overtime.
You want more of a podcast? Free with the app or online at ESPN Sioux Falls. Overtime with Bert Rameen on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO.
Right back with you. It's the Monday edition of Overtime. Appreciate you tuning us in as always. ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO. As you're digging your way out of the snow today, please be careful out and about on the roads. Beautiful time of year to be soaking up some men's and women's NCAA tournament basketball. Here to break that down, talk about the college sports landscape as a whole. Bill Bender of the Sporting News joins us now on the ESPN hotline. Bill, another great weekend at never disappoints, the NCAA tournament, men's and women's side. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was a wonderful weekend. A lot of chalk, but you're gonna you won't mind at all when you see the matchups we get this week.
I tried my best earlier in hour number 1 of our show to give my 1 through 16 rankings of the teams left. It's pretty darn difficult when it comes to the highlights for you. It doesn't have to be a team that's left, and it might just be Jack Golke. But what are a couple other big highlights from the first weekend of the tournament on the men's side? Oakland and Jack Golke have to make the list, right?
Oh, for sure. That was a wonderful upset. Those always make up. The tournament is about, the first weekend is about the upsets. I thought it was you had to stay up late, whether it was Oregon Creighton in the second round. What a game that was. Last night, I was about ready to go to bed, and Texas A&M and Houston went haywire for the last minute or so, and then into overtime. It's a lot of fun watching those games. I think Jack Golke, obviously the headline. About NC State, consider C.J. Burns. He'd be the one for this week with what they've represented as the lowest seed left.
Bill Bender of the Sporting News is our guest. Again, the ACC, Big East, couple strong performances from the conferences as a whole so far in March Madness and NCAA men's tournament. What is your overall opinion, and what do you think the amount of steam is in regards to potential expansion? Is it just monetary based, or is there some other impetus and reason for potential expansion of what I think is a perfect form to crown a champion in the NCAA tournament?
I mean, they may add 4 more teams. I could see that happening as a, just to increase the first 4. I caution against going too far north of that because you're getting away from the one-page bracket, right?
Yep.
And we enjoy it. Like you said, some things just don't need tweak. And I think this is a great example of something that doesn't need refined. It's perfect as is. You mentioned Jack. Who was the first name out of your mouth from the weekend? Jack Golke.
Yep.
That's what the first weekend's all about. It's great.
And it is great. And that's the reason that I kind of go to bat for these mid-majors and these schools that you've never heard of. And you kind of find out and start to learn things. I think the NCAA tournament is the perfect embodiment of you learn something new every day. You learn something new every day on your couch for the NCAA tournament, including where Oakland University is. You mentioned the first 4. If they do expand that, are you hearing anything in regards to if there's parameters based on what teams, mid-majors or otherwise, would be in those now first 8?
No, I mean, but we'll spend all this whole season talking about that bubble, right? Like we do anyway. And for every Virginia, which was a mishap, well, what happens? NC State and Clemson go to the ACC or the Sweet 16. So it's hard to penalize an entire conference based on one team having a bad night. On the flip side, as you mentioned, and I'm a MAC grad, as you know, and Indiana State might win the NIT. That's like the biggest statement they can make after being kind of snubbed out of the tournament based on a wonderful regular season.
It's interesting stuff. Obviously, year in and year out, you got the teams clamoring that they needed to be in the tournament or should have been in the tournament, and they end up going on a run. I hope Indiana State does get the job done. Bill, in your eyes right now, you've seen a lot of basketball over the last 3-4 days, over the last 3-4 months. Who are the most proven teams in the tournament right now? Of course, UConn, Houston come to mind, but who are a few other teams right now that you really like their staying power into the Elite Eight and maybe into the Final Four?
Well, I mean, it's tough. I mean, you look at that Purdue region. I could make a case for all 4 teams. Really, that's what happens when you get as much chalk as we have. You make a case for all 4 teams in the Houston region. With Duke and Marquette and what they've been able to do. That Marquette, and who knows if NC State's going to keep winning. I trust UConn the most. Probably after that, I still think Houston with that combination, they got their scare out of the way. I would anticipate they play better in the Sweet 16. They just can't run into foul trouble.
Now, Bill, I want to ask you the other side of the question. Teams that are well thought of, everybody's well thought of that's in the Sweet 16 right now. NC State is the highest seed at number 11. Is it Clemson? Is it NC State? Is it maybe Illinois or San Diego State most likely to lose in this next round? What do you think?
Yeah, I think you got to take a look at Purdue and the matchup. Gonzaga. Gonzaga, or unless you don't consider Gonzaga a sleeper, which I really don't.
Yeah.
Illinois could beat Iowa State very easily. That's going to be a fun toss-up game between 2 teams that have played very well since the conference tournament. So, Purdue, I know they got through the first weekend. They erased some questions about that first round. But in terms of playing a Gonzaga team that looked really good over the weekend and scoring, and what is it about Gonzaga? When they're off that 1 or 2 line, they seem to do better in the tournament.
And definitely true in a big-time matchup, Purdue and Gonzaga coming your way in the Sweet 16. Bill Bender of the Sporting News is our guest here. Monday edition of Overtime. You can find him on Twitter at BillBender92, sportingnews.com. When it comes to college football, of course, we're in the offseason. We got spring games coming up. We got all sorts of transfer portal news still trickling out, but college football playoff expansion. We got the 12 teams, and I got a big gripe with the idea that we already have to expand beyond 12 when we haven't even played 12 and felt what 12 feels like and felt like what exactly that will look like as far as snubs go and teams maybe on the outside looking in. Where do we stand right now with the movement to 14? Is it a foregone conclusion?
Yeah, I think we'll eventually get to 14, and which is odd because like you said, we haven't tried the 12-team model. I think the SEC and the Big Ten are going to continue to drive that movement. For the SEC and Big Ten, will try to get as many automatic qualifiers as they can, which in some ways I get it. They are trying to embody what the NFL does, the NFL playoff model. But in some ways, I'm like, why didn't we try 8 first? I still think we've skipped a step in going from 4 to 12, and we'd certainly be skipping a step if we went from 12 to 14 without watching the 12.
Definitely true, but again, 12 I think deserves a lot of time, maybe a year or 2 minimum. We got so many years of the 14 playoff with a lot of people saying it's perfect, some people saying tweak it a little bit, and now we're already talking about going from 12 to 14 before we've even seen a year of the 12-team college football playoff tournament. Bill Bender of the Sporting News. Bill, before we let you go, just an opportunity for you to be right or wrong on the show. What does the Final Four look like for you, and what pick do you have for us today on the show?
I'm going to go with UConn. I think they get through. I think Marquette finds a way in their region. I like Arizona out west and Purdue in the Midwest. I do think Purdue finds a way to get through, which creates a very chalky Final Four of 1s and 2s. And I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Marquette and UConn play each other in the national championship game. I really like Marquette starting 5 to balance and a healthy Tyler Kolek and what he does for that team.
Interesting stuff. I got Zona as my champ. I still feel pretty decent about that based on the fact that I made the pick last Wednesday. But overall, exciting stuff. NCAA tournament into the Sweet 16 on the men's side. Bill Bender of the Sporting News, our guest. Bill, until next time, always a blast to have you and talk football, basketball, and everything else. Thanks so much for the time.
Hey, no problem. Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
All right, that's Bill Bender of the Sporting News. Again, sportingnews.com and at BillBender92. Great wide-ranging articles there. Collegiate basketball, collegiate football, baseball, everything across the board. Sportingnews.com. Bill Bender, our guest just then. He's got it relatively chalk in the Final Four. I was thinking it was kind of that kind of season. And I'm not saying I picked all 1 seeds because I most assuredly did not. By the way, I'm right in the thick of it around my bracket contests here in terms of being good, bad, or otherwise. I'm right in the middle. I'm within striking distance. I need Arizona to win the whole thing, to be frank and honest with you. Pretty much the only person with the Wildcats in either of my bracket contests here. I wonder where you are. If you got a really great bracket like my older brother does, brag about it. Dial us up, 605-362-3776. Bill Bender with the Sporting News. Then, coming up next, it's the good, the bad, the ugly to say so long on this snowy Monday of overtime.
Stream us online, stream us on the app. Streaming now. Overtime with Bert Ramin on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO. Sioux Falls sports leader.
Back to wrap up this Monday edition of Overtime. Just realized I forgot to get to those aforementioned NBA title odds. I told you the Timberwolves were on the move. They're on the move up just a bit. They've broken the tie finally. Been tied with the Lakers with their odds for the NBA Finals victory for quite some time. And now the Timberwolves have blasted their way to a tie for the 8th best odds for the NBA Finals. Boston still your top team, plus 200. Denver has narrowed it down to plus 300. Got the Clippers at plus 600, Bucks at plus 700, and the Phoenix Suns tied with the OKC Thunder for the fifth best odds to win the whole darn thing, plus 2,000. So the top four have quite a bit of demarcation between 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. Boston, Denver, Clippers, Bucks are the top four. Suns, Thunder, Mavericks, 76ers, and the Sixers with plus 3,000 odds, identical to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Minnesota has surpassed, no longer tied with the likes of the Lakers and the Knicks. Minnesota plus 3,000. Lakers, Knicks, and the Heat plus 3,500 right now at DraftKings Sportsbook. Let's wrap up the show the only way we know how. It's the good, the bad, the ugly on a Monday.
Many days there are those who can be called a problem child. You know the ones. They have a tendency to display an ugly side. They have their whiny moments. Some display an outright bad side of themselves. And then there are those who stand out in a good way. Well, here they are. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Time to deliver the good, the bad, the ugly. Before we dive into that, going off script a little bit, has anybody seen the head coach picture? Yearly tradition from these NFL offseason meetings. Andy Reid, the guy that just won back-to-back Super Bowls with the Kansas City Chiefs, he has got to be the best coach and one of the best people in the entire NFL, because the majority of these head coaches in this picture, some of them are absent. Tomlin's not there. Sean Payton's not there. A couple others are not in the photo. But you got all the McVay, Shanahan bros seated together, looking hip and cool with their watches on, their sneakers, their little capri pants, and they're as cool as can be. By the way, Kevin O'Connell's in that group. You got the two Harbaugh brothers, pretty casual, sitting front and center. You got a couple guys out to the right. Mike McDaniel, by the way, one of the few coaches who is not wearing a collared shirt. But Andy Reid, front and center. Nearly double the size of Dave Canales to his left, and also Andy Reid sporting a Hawaiian button-up T-shirt. Never change, Andy Reid. One-of-a-kind individual, one of, if not the best coach in the NFL now, and a surefire Hall of Famer in due time. Speaking of the New England Patriots, NFL talk here. We'll start off there with the good. The reason this is good is that the Patriots could get richer, and the Minnesota Vikings have another opportunity and potential landing spot to trade up in this year's NFL draft. First-year Patriots head coach Gerard Mayo said on Sunday that the team isn't locked into making a selection at number 3 in the NFL draft. Obviously, quarterback is definitely a priority. With that being said, we're still open to any type of deals that come our way. Mayo said on the first day of the NFL's annual meeting, when asked where the team stands in its evaluation of the quarterbacks. We're very far into that process, but we have a long way to go. Definitely feel like we have time to really nail down our prospects and who we are going to go after. This past week, Mayo traveled alongside Executive Director of Scouting Elliott Wolf, who has the final personnel say within the organization, to pro days for USC's Caleb Williams and Michigan's J.J. McCarthy. Later this week, they're expected to do the same with LSU's Jaden Daniels and North Carolina's Drake May. So the Patriots perhaps still open for business. They got a whole month to flirt and get fawned after certain quarterbacks there. New England picks 3rd. You got Arizona. That pick is for sale at 4. Chargers pick probably available at number 5 for the Minnesota Vikings, who hold picks number 11 and number 23. Those two will be needed to package up and get into the top 5, and probably something else, maybe a first rounder, depending upon how high you go. Minnesota will be mortgaging the future in some respects to get the quarterback of the future for the Minnesota Vikings, and the Patriots perhaps open for business. The Kansas City Chiefs are finalizing a deal to send their star cornerback L'Jarius Sneed to the Tennessee Titans. League sources told ESPN's Adam Schefter late last week the Chiefs are expected to receive a 2025 third-round pick, in addition to a 2024 seventh-round pick swap for Sneed, who will sign a new contract with Tennessee, according to the sources. Is this good value for the Chiefs? Absolutely not. But when you don't plan on this individual being on your team, you facilitate the tag to do a tag and trade, you're basically getting paid picks for just about nothing because there's no way the Kansas City Chiefs were planning on having L'Jarius Sneed back at that number. Probably don't have the money to give him an extension because they opted to get Chris Jones in-house on a long-term deal. Instead, L'Jarius Sneed off to the Tennessee Titans for a 2025 third-round pick and a pick swap in the 7th round of this year. Titans, another big move. L'Jarius Sneed, marquee name added to their secondary. Other good news, right-hander Chase Anderson, right place, right time, agreeing yesterday to a 1-year contract with the Red Sox 1 day after he was cut from a minor league deal by the Pittsburgh Pirates. The 36-year-old was 1-6 with a 5.75 ERA last year in 17 starts, as well as 2 relief appearances for Tampa Bay and Colorado. Red Sox need arms. Red Sox need potential on the mound, and Anderson 59-56 over his career, a 4.35 ERA. We'll see what he can do with the Boston Red Sox. To open a roster spot, Boston placed righty Lucas Giolito on the 60-day IL. Giolito is expected to miss the season after his right UCL was repaired with an internal brace. Chase Anderson inking a deal to join the Boston Red Sox. On to the bad here. Delicate situation. Deion Sanders trying to game the NFL draft. Not my words, but ESPN.com with the article right now. The Colorado coach says his son, quarterback Shedeur Sanders, and two-way star cornerback and wide receiver, one of the most exciting and best players in college football, Travis Hunter, will decide where they go in the 2025 NFL draft and not the other way around, as is traditionally the case. I know where I want them to go, Deion Sanders told a podcast on Friday, so it's certain cities that ain't going to happen. It's going to be an Eli. Eli, of course, in reference to a 2-time Super Bowl winning quarterback Eli Manning, who outright rejected to play for San Diego after pick number 1 overall by the Chargers and facilitated a trade to the New York Giants. Of course, that was for Phillip Rivers. Both players, spectacular careers, but Eli has 2 Super Bowls. Phillip Rivers never made a Super Bowl. Deion Sanders had already said that he doesn't want his son going nowhere cold. According to a quote, Packers are out on Shedeur Sanders via the draft, and on Friday told the podcast that there are certain cities that fit before mentioning San Francisco, Dallas, Washington, and Baltimore as possible landing spots. There were certain cities that fit for me, Deion said about being drafted by the Falcons in 1989. Atlanta fit, and I want that for my kids, all of them. I want the right fit. It was Rio and Atlanta. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Deion Sanders trying to work around and game the NFL draft in 2025. I think it's a bad look. An opportunity's an opportunity. An NFL team's an NFL team. Sure, everyone wants to go and play for the Kansas City Chiefs and win a Super Bowl every year. Everyone wants to be a part of the Niners when they have such wealth of talent on the roster. But that's not how the league works, and teams aren't going to trade up and trade for you just because you don't want to play certain places. I think you're looking a gift horse in the mouth if you're thinking that NFL teams are going to be so naive and draft somebody and try to trade them each and every year. I don't like that. I don't like where it says for the direction of the NFL. I don't like the message it sends to the young people making the jump up into the National Football League either. That's the latest from Deion Sanders, ESPN.com. With that article, on to the ugly weekend activity for Georgia running back Trevor Etienne. Younger brother of Travis Etienne, current NFL running back with the Jaguars, was arrested early on Sunday on charges of driving under the influence, reckless driving, and 2 other misdemeanors, according to online records. Etienne, Florida transfer, younger brother of Jacksonville Jaguars running back Travis Etienne, was booked at 4:35 a.m. on Sunday morning in the Athens Clark jail and released about an hour later after posting bond. Now, this is ugly. For obvious reasons. You don't want to get in trouble, but the reason that it's uglier than ugly is because this continues and continues and continues to happen with the Georgia football program. Georgia has had a string of driving-related problems involving players in and around Athens, including an incident back in January 2023 where recruiting staff member Chandler LaCroix and player Devin Willock were killed while racing a car driven by star defensive lineman Jalen Carter. Both cars were going over 100 miles an hour. They need to find some way to get through to the young people within that football program and around that football program to get this to stop. That's the good, the bad, the ugly. That is our show on a Monday. Have a great day, Sioux Falls. Thanks as always for being along for the ride. We'll talk to you tomorrow, 11 to 1, when the next edition of Overtime rolls around right here on ESPN Sioux Falls.